So sorry, guys.
Good. All right, there we go. This video. All right, looks like we've got everybody. Okay, and it's 6:30. So I will go ahead and get us started. So in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 121.22, House Bill 197 and 404, I hereby call to order the Board of Education for the Bexley City School District regular board meeting of Tuesday, May 11th, 2021. Mr. Smith, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Barno.
Here.
Ms. Minio.
Here.
Ms. Mitchell.
Here.
Ms. Powers.
Here.
Ms. Snowden.
Here, thank you. All right, moving on. Can I have a motion to approve our minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Sorry, I think Ms. Mitchell, we're working on our locations. All in favor of approval of the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Thank you, that motion carries. Right, so moving on in our agenda, this is a great time of year for us. We always have the opportunity to talk about Friend of Education, which is an award that is given to individuals who have made a significant contribution to the public education of the city of Bexley. It's somebody or people who are not current employees of the Bexley School, but someone who goes beyond the ordinary to give his or her time to our schools. So this year, I would like to announce that the award for the Friend of Education goes to the medical doctors on the Bexley City School COVID-19 evaluation team. So we can all give them our virtual hand, real big hand. So the medical doctors, along with the rest of the evaluation team, helped develop our COVID-19 mitigation strategies for our schools, classrooms, cafeterias, athletic teams, and venues. They also helped draft our 50-page COVID-19 handbook that served as our reference for all of our students, employees, and parents. They freely shared their expertise, wisdom with our staff and administration to address the multiple questions this pandemic threw at us. And in October, they began to discuss and develop a metric that we could use to make our learning mode decisions using the data that we had available. When the cases increased in November, they began and continued to help us meet weekly to offer the recommendations of the learning mode to myself and Dr. Good. As one nominator said, our watch team, our evaluation team, understood that they were not the decision makers, and that there were several times they did not always agree with each other. And there were also times when their advice was not followed, but their strength was their ability to engage in civil discourse. And it was a pleasure to watch their passion and see what they could do for our Bexley City School District learning community. So it is my great pleasure and with appreciation that I announce tonight that our medical doctors of our evaluation team, Dr. Abby Norris, Dr. Ted Brasky, Dr. Mary Lynn Nyland, Dr. Jim McDonald, and Dr. Allison Norris will be recognized as this year's Friends of Education recipients. An engraved brick with their names will be installed in the Alumni Plaza to memorialize this recognition. And we thank you all very, very much for your service to our community. All right, so Oh, and I also need to go back real quick, sorry, to just take us out of order for 1 minute. Our approval of the agenda. Sorry, can I have a motion to approve item 1D, the approval of agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Thank you, that motion carries. So at this point in our meeting, can I please have a motion from a board member to enter into executive session for the under Ohio Revised Code 121.22 for the purpose of discussion with respect to public employees for appointment or employment?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
I think it's roll call.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're
do a
right.
roll call.
Thank you. Can we do a roll call, Mr. Smith?
Ms. Powers,
Aye.
Ms. Minio,
Yes.
Mr. Barno,
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell,
Yes.
Ms. Snowden.
Yes. Thank you. All right. So we will be moving into executive session, and we will, when we come back out of that, we anticipate board action. So we will join back on the public Zoom as soon as we're through with executive session. Thank you all for your patience, and we'll be back as soon as we can.
Philip, you're unmuted.
Sorry, just waiting on Victoria, and then we'll get moving again. All moving around here. There we go. Okay. I need a motion to reconvene out of executive session.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All right. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. All right, that motion carries. Thank you. So now that we're back in regular session, I would like to entertain a motion to appoint John Barno on behalf of the Board of Education with authority to negotiate a contract with Jason Fine for the position of superintendent.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Sorry.
Is that a second, Alicia?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I thought
Thanks.
somebody else seconds. Yeah.
Thank you. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Thank you, Mr. Barno. Let me make sure I was clear because we were on Zoom. Can I'm going to recall this vote because I wasn't sure which you were saying aye to, Mr. Barno, because of the delay. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed, same sign? Thank you. All right, that motion carries unanimously. All right, so with that, we start on board updates on our agenda. And I am going to start just with a thank you to our community members and and to Dr. Fine for going through this process with us. I'm super excited about it. And I have down here on our agenda, which I want to follow the superintendent search under Ms. Powers' report because she has been our board representative in charge of our superintendent search. So we can say a few more things there. I just wanted to start off by saying congratulations and thank you. And we're looking forward to working on a contract. So, and also on our superintendent policy committee, which is my other report, you will see policies on our agenda tonight that you've had information about from Dr. Good and OSBA. I would just remark that they are administrative in nature and do not really have much content for us to review. So I know you all have had a chance to read them, so nothing more needs to be said about that. So moving on to Ms. Powers. And Ms. Powers, maybe you want to start at the bottom of your assignment with the superintendent search.
I will do that. So I have comments about our process and I have a couple extra comments. So I'll just ask everybody to bear with me. On the superintendent search, as Marley noted, I was the person on the board who was appointed to assist with the search process. We had a very compressed timeline, and we did that in order to get to the end of the process by this point in the year, by early May, and that's because that is when in most districts contracts are awarded, and you know that's sort of the end of the time limit for contracts. And we didn't want to go any further beyond that because we wanted to ensure that we were casting the widest net possible and that we were making it easier for possible candidates to decide to apply to our district. I'm so grateful, and I know the board shares my gratitude to all the Bexley stakeholders, including students, parents, staff, and community members, for all their engagement throughout this entire process. Our process began when we selected a search firm, and then the focus groups held by Ray and Associates, which culminated in the formation of an 11-point quality profile for what we were looking for in our next superintendent. Ray and Associates contacted, through their different processes, over 1,300 potential candidates, and ultimately 31 folks applied through their application process. Candidates were screened by Ray and Associates, and top candidates were identified from the states of New Jersey, New York, Ohio, and Texas. The board interviewed candidates, and ultimately 3 candidates came to visit with us here in the district on May 4th, last Tuesday, for a full day of interviews. It was a long day for everyone, and it was a busy day. Stakeholders worked with Ray and Associates to develop questions to help lead the Q&A sessions. Those sessions were very helpful to the board because it permitted us to get significant input from stakeholders. We received 298 separate responses to the candidate impression form request. The sessions were also helpful to our candidates, each of whom learned so much about our district through the process that went on. In particular, our candidates commented on the outstanding job our students did in putting together and asking questions in their sessions, and so I was really proud of our district for how all of that went with their leadership, as well as the leadership of many other stakeholders. So a big thank you to all of our staff, students, parents, community members, and everyone who participated. And I want to also say thank you to Ray and Associates for their work and support every step of the way. We are very excited to be at this point in the process. We had an outstanding group of candidates for our next superintendent, and as a result, it has been a wonderful but difficult process. Each candidate offered different talents and strengths. With Dr. Fine, we would have someone who can lead us into the future as a strong communicator, a good listener, with a deep understanding of special education, a commitment to the district's work on diversity, equity, and belonging, and a collaborative and team-building leadership style. We recognize that he has not been a superintendent, but we also recognize that he will have great support here in our district. His optimism and enthusiasm for Bexley and what we can do to continue to build our district resonated with a number of our stakeholders as well as with the board. I'm very excited and grateful to be at this point in our process with such a fine candidate. And I didn't realize I was making that pun until tonight when I read it, sorry.
Fine candidate.
Fine candidate. So let me now go to my other reports quickly.
Thank you.
Bexley Rec, since our last board meeting on April 6th, the Bexley Rec Board has met twice. We met on April 7th and we met on May 5th. And highlights of those meetings include that there have been plans put in place for the reopening of the pool, which will be May 29th, albeit with a reduced capacity due to COVID, but we're very excited to have that community resource opening. The Chamber of Commerce has plans for Taste of Bexley to take place at Jeffrey Park on September 23rd. Jeffrey Summer Camp is going forward and they are already at capacity. The summer activity brochure is available online this year. And we got to tour the beautiful expansion of the Jeffrey Mansion, and it's almost complete. It is spectacular. We are so grateful that the Bexley High School senior party can be held in the new carriage space. It's going to be a wonderful evening in that space. And so it looks great, and I'm really pleased that the rec department could provide that. The next meeting of that board is on June 2nd. My last report is on the Franklin County School Board Alliance. The Board Alliance met on April 10th. There were discussions about COVID and end-of-year event safety, student vaccinations, and the Ed Choice School Voucher Program. The next meeting of the Alliance is this Thursday, April 13th. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barno.
Thank you. So first of all, I think Dr. Fine is an attendee here, but I'd like to welcome Dr. Fine to our district. I'm excited for the prospect of Dr. Fine coming in to our district, that we are excited to have someone that has the excitement and the experience that he has, even though he does not have the experience as a superintendent. We think that we have, to borrow Victoria's pun, a very fine person in coming in as our superintendent. I look forward to working with Dr. Fine here over the next few months in the transition, and with such great support and administrative staff that we have. I think the transition, and especially with Dr. Good in place right now, having all of those pieces in place will put us in another level that I'm looking forward to. I think I would like to also talk about our other two finalists, in especially reading through what we heard from the community, the comments, the input that we had, and literally hundreds and hundreds of data points that we were able to look through these candidates. And I'm so ecstatic that we had three highly qualified, awesome people, authentic people that came in, that especially when we were able to interview in person, to make those connections with all three of those, and deliberating and talking about these candidates, and reviewing everything that they had to offer was not an easy task. And I commend my colleagues, my fellow board members, on respectful, hard decisions, but making the decision ultimately with Dr. Fine. So I wanted to talk about the other two candidates briefly, and make sure that we recognize the high quality people that they are, and the authenticity, and the desire, and the enthusiasm that they showed. So again, welcome Dr. Fine to Bexley, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. With that said, a couple of reports. Mr. Pettit and I met on the Tech Advisory Committee, and we went through a lot of stuff. Mr. Pettit does an awesome job with our technology, and one of the things that we talked about is, when Mr. Pettit came in, did a technology audit, put us on such a great track for not only infrastructure, but putting in place like a service catalog for all of our users, students, parents, teachers to use. But talked about, looking at doing maybe not a full audit, but definitely a new 3-year plan, a new technology plan, and with Toby in place too, to have that input, and having Toby as our tech integration coach, looking at the different aspects and where we have gone over the last 3 years, especially after COVID and all the issues that we've gone through, and now learning how to handle remote issues, and all the different things that weaknesses that were there that we've been able to address, including a new firewall that there will be installed over this summer, in improvement and updated service catalog. I don't want to get too technical, because I don't understand most of it. No, seriously, I want to make sure that I touch on everything. The tech integration coach with Toby, he is our principal over the summer school, and how that is going to help integrate further our technology and Toby's integration into our district. As far as talking about digital wellness, which is obviously something that we always need to address, and things that come up that we know that we need to refocus our efforts, as always, and talk about inclusion and bringing people the more opportunities that we were able to do over COVID, with hotspots and laptops and different things that we were able to provide those that maybe needed that additional support, and providing that to those families and those students that needed that additional help. And as I pointed out, and obviously with the one-to-one, again, can't thank the BEF enough for helping with that, and providing us with that opportunity, not only through the pandemic, but as we move forward. And again, we're in year 3 of the the technology plan, and we talked about looking at, updating that and maybe doing a new 3-year plan as to what our new horizons look like, especially after going through the pandemic. Athletic board, we did have an athletic board meeting. Specifically the Ohio OHSAA and the Ohio Revised Code actually talks about what types of GPA requirements that school districts need. We talked about eligibility and how we would handle as a district and keeping our standards where we want to keep them, as well as making sure that we're meeting all of those requirements under the Ohio Revised Code and OHSAA requirements. We have a second follow-up meeting. We had some really great breakout discussions. Our students offer great perspectives, our coaches, and having in those breakout sessions and talking about how maybe a recommendation to the board after that meeting, which is the 20th, next Thursday, that we will be doing by Zoom and talking about those issues and perhaps coming to the board with a policy not only on GPA requirements, but also how many classes that a student has to pass to be eligible, as well as our study tables and the things that have been very successful. And I apologize for going on so long. One other thing, Ms. Mitchell and I were able to participate. It was on April 8th. It was a couple of days after our last meeting in the community coffee, some awesome discussions, and it provided quite a bit of opportunity just to have good discussions with Ms. Mitchell and I and various community members that came from all different questions, all different angles, and having a good back and forth and having those discussions. And I think those are great ideas. And obviously with the new superintendent, we'll have, conversations and coffees like that. But I think it is also good for us as board members to be able to participate in those and get discussions, on whatever topic, and not just telling the public what we want them to hear. Let them ask questions. And Ms. Mitchell and I mean, I'll let her speak for herself, but I thought it was a great conversation. It was an hour. We set a time limit, and that hour went by fast because we had such good conversations. So with that said, those are my reports. And sorry for going so long.
Thank you. No, we appreciate your work. All right, so moving on to Ms. Minio.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Snowden. So I'm going to approach the superintendent comments first, and then I'll move on to my board reports. So in regards to our recent superintendent search, I'd like to thanks to all of the candidates, all of the applicants, and most especially to our 3 finalists. I have to echo what Mr. Barno said, that it was truly an honor to discuss education with all 3 of them and kind of talk to them and get to know them. It was truly an honor. We're very lucky to have such a great group. Thanks to the members of our community that took an active role in the search process, and to our search firm, Ray and Associates, for the hard work and willingness to be available to answer questions as needed. I feel like I had a lot of questions for them. And of course, to my fellow board members, it was definitely an extensive process that we went through. Okay, so regarding our move to move into contract negotiations with Dr. Fine, I'm excited for what he can bring to our district. Besides reviewing data and feedback and watching the candidate forums, I spent the weekend actually making connections with literally friends from grade school, high school, and college who have experience in education, discussing what makes a good leader. Really kind of like trying to take a look at that. And something that I heard time and time again is the superintendent helps set the tone and the culture for the work. And that's really one of the reasons I'm excited to support Dr. Fine, is because I think the energy and excitement and experience that he brings to our community and our school culture. Not to mention his personal and professional special education experience. On a personal note, I say this to the teachers and coaches and staff who work with my own sons. I thank them often for making my sons better humans, and taking kind of a look at the whole person, not just the skill or the grade. I'm excited to see where we can go and how we continue to grow in directions that support the development of good humans and not just successful students. So I'm excited for the culture that Dr. Fine looks to bring, and Dr. Fine, I know you're on. I hope this is okay. I stole this from something that you submitted to us. It's a quote directly from you. It says, "I have chosen to live my life and to lead my community and schools with a sense of relentless optimism." I think that's a great culture and tone to set forth for our district moving forward, for our students moving forward. So I am very excited about where we can go, how we can grow. Okay, so now I messed all my papers up. Here we go. So my legislative report, I will tell you that on April 21st, House Bill 110 passed. April 21st, House Bill 110 passed. It has to do with budget and finances. I could give you information, but I would have to say, if you have like serious questions about what it's all about, Kyle's probably a better resource than I am. I'm not gonna pretend that he's not. And then currently House Bill 290 is up for discussion, and it has to do with vouchers for public, public, charter, and private schools. So if you want information about how to weigh your voice in on that House Bill 290, board members, let me know and I can forward you some information. And that's my report.
Great. Thank you very much. Ms. Mitchell.
Yes, give me 1 second. I was moving stuff around on my keyboard here so that I don't forget.
Yours on you. I know the feeling.
And then I'm like, wait, where did everybody go? I don't think I need the Zoom there. So for BEF, we had 68 alumni bricks that were installed in the piazza. We had 5 classroom grants come up for review. They'll be reviewed in our next Board of Governors meeting on May 20th. And each of the grants touched on literacy, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the arts in Bexley. M-Factor will be hosting its high school mentoring event this Friday for rising 9th graders. And they will receive a free book of choice courtesy of the BEF Brandt Family Grant Read for Life Endowment. The gratitude event obviously had lots of views online. I actually watched it a couple of times because get to see all the little faces was a real treat of just expressing our gratitude and thanks to our incredibly hardworking faculty this year. This goes without saying, we still need donations for the one-to-one technology. So if anybody's out there looking for some nifty tax deductions, this is a great time to give a nice one-time gift. And then, or do like I do and do a monthly deduction from your account. I had the opportunity to, and I don't think I mentioned it, but the BEF will meet again May 20th at 7 p.m. That's our next meeting. I had the pleasure to represent the Board of Education. Initially, I was asked to represent in my role with the BZAP for the city of Bexley, but we had enough representation there. And so I represented the schools for the Bexley Steering Committee for the Livingston Avenue Plan. It's a joint committee between the city of Columbus and the city of Bexley. Had our kickoff meeting last week where we brought together city leadership from both communities, stakeholders from both communities to talk about reimagining the Livingston Avenue corridor to not only include the residential, but the business district as well. We set timelines, schedules, and we'll begin a series of joint meetings where we will hash out the goals. It was a really productive meeting to have that many different minds involved. And then I did prepare a statement in regards to our superintendent search. And I think my fellow board members sort of know I don't shy away from speaking my mind, but I did want to take the opportunity to absolutely thank our community and our stakeholders, our administrators and our staff for weighing in, giving us quite a lot of information to digest and think about. But I did consider how best to approach my remarks tonight. I've never hidden my desire to serve this district by advocating for what I believe in, for those who so often do not enjoy the privilege of influence and deference that others do. And when doing that, everything in my power to expect and challenge Bexley City Schools to not only be equitable, valuable, and impactful, but also a district I would be proud to have raised my children in. To that end, understanding the role of a board member in governing all too often demands one does not put individual needs first. A governing body such as ours that is so intimately tied to our community means that at times we are not going to agree. We're simply going to see things differently. And it is, however, differences that often perplex us and leave us fumbling over one another, angry, sometimes frustrated, and most certainly exhausted. It is also our greatest strength. We were given a moment to consider for the first time in our 100+ year history a candidate that didn't always fit the too familiar what looks like Bexley. And in a time when we as a community have faced and began to question our district internally and externally about who we are, I was elated at that opportunity. We are fortunate to have built a district that top tier talent not only considered us, but 31 candidates made it through a big pool. They had incredible resumes and accomplishments. 31 people wanted to work for this incredibly dedicated board to lead what I feel are some of the finest educational leaders and faculty members in the state. They are very special and talented people and shape the most amazing minds that will absolutely one day lead. And that is because of all of you and our community, and I'm deeply excited and grateful for that. The idea that our first ever candidate of color elated me, as I said. Yet in weighing the Zoom videos and community conversation, I still viewed a different candidate as my choice. And that left my heart somewhat heavy. That doesn't diminish the clear talent that Dr. Fine has cultivated in his years as Jones Middle School principal, and I'm confident that it will translate to success for Bexley. This does not diminish the impressive resume that Dr. Bell and his incredible work in understanding the literal epidemic of losing students of color in higher education and beyond is work that's critical to the conversation and one we all discuss often as a board. I still understand and deeply value a highly functional board of education. We are the arm that takes a lot of hits, but our vote steers the success of the district and sets the priorities that will hold the superintendent treasurer accountable for its academic and financial well-being. It goes without saying again that 31 people actually wanted to come work for a board full of stubborn, highly demanding, ever curious, and deeply critical people who still remain committed to the functionality and success of this board and our district. We understand our oath never expected us to always agree, but builds consensus and work to support the success of our schools. And I was honored to have an opportunity to weigh this very critical decision on behalf of the district, regardless of my personal choice. Dr. Fine's success is our success, and it must be. I will continue, as always, to support the district and work in every way that I'm called upon to make sure that that is successful. And that's all I have for today.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody's input very much. And moving on now to our student representative, our student council president, who I believe this will be your last month, Ms. George, is our student council president. Sarah, what can you tell us?
First, I just want to say thank you guys so much for everything you guys have done for us this year. And personally, me, I've enjoyed this opportunity to sit on this board with you guys and hear what you guys have to say so much. So first, I want to say thank you for that. To Dr. Fine, obviously, I won't be here next year to see you in action, but I have total confidence that you'll be able to provide our school system with the support and leadership it needs. As for a student council basis, we just elected our student council president for next year. I'm happy to say that's Quinn Hall. He is a fantastic person, and I am turning over the gavel with him with full confidence that he will lead us in the perfect direction, especially with the high school. Next Friday is our Clash of the Classes, which we have been waiting to do for long time now. We're really excited about it. It's going to be the last Friday that everybody is there together, and it's going to be socially distanced outside, and very lucky to be able to have some type of normalcy within the student council this year. So that's all I have, and thank you guys again so much for having me this year.
Thank you, Sarah, very much. And best of
Good
luck.
luck to you.
And Sarah, tell everybody, what are you doing next year?
I'm attending Bradley University, where I'll be studying special education.
Fantastic. We'd love to have you in our education world. Thank you very much for all you've done.
Thank
All
you.
right. So then we're moving on to our superintendent's reports. Dr. Good.
Well, good evening and congratulations to our Board of Education, which represents Bexley's families and governs their public schools. I speak only on my own behalf when I say that I'm pleased the process for selecting a superintendent is nearing a result. Certainly my commitment to this wonderful city and its children's education will continue through the transition of leadership and beyond so far as I am able. I am confident that Dr. Jason Fine will find, as I have found, opportunities to make even better an already very efficient, highly effective public education system, one that is ranked by US News and World Report as the best in Central Ohio. Well done, Bexley. We have so very much to be thankful for. A truly professional faculty and staff that supports learners' growth across all domains, physical, social, emotional, and cognitive. Extraordinarily clean and safe facilities and grounds maintained by a crew of dedicated women and men who care as much for Bexley City Schools properties as they do for their own homes. An unparalleled administrative team that provides appropriate leadership and confidential accountability for all personnel, children and adults. Our administrative assistants, receptionists, and secretaries who serve with a smile and regularly deliver ahead of schedule and under budget. And of course, the incomparable food service operation that truly is Bextra and more. In fact, this month, we celebrated all school staff and made certain we remembered those who are less often recognized, the accounts payable and payroll clerks, our curriculum leaders and instructional coaches, school nurses, classroom aides and interpreters, drivers of vehicles, keepers of warehouses, discerners of data, coordinators and managers, technicians and directors. You see, even within the microcosm that is Bexley City Schools, it still takes a village. And while the proverbial buck stops with me, the superintendent, everyone knows that inclusion and collaboration, iterative solutions, and communication are the keys to our shared problem solving and subsequently our shared success. In this respect, Bexley has never disappointed. I trust that the next superintendent will be afforded the same spirit of what I call our collective community's mind glow. It is what contributes to being the best in Central Ohio, and I'm genuinely proud of all of our residents' contributions to that achievement. On to the consent agenda. Tonight, we are seeking the board's renewal of contracts for licensed and certified professionals. The length of contracts is determined using 3 criteria: ongoing training or professional development, holistic scores that consider both the employee's job performance and the student's academic growth, and finally, the negotiated agreement with the Bexley Education Association. Congratulations to all those being renewed for a 1-year, a 2-year, or a continuing contract. Also, we seek the board's approval of resignations due to employees moving to another district or for the purposes of retirement. These friends will be missed. Now, there is still work to be done here in the summer, and the proposed extended service contracts provide extra paid workdays. And then we have some, but not all of our fall sports contracts, and a contract for a highly skilled student worker to operate lighting and sound in the auditorium, which I believe we all know is sorely needed, as well as a contract for a new food service employee, and we welcome Yolanda Scheib. And finally, we have a few new home instructors and classified substitutes for the board's consideration. I'm also asking the board to sunset 2 policies whose corresponding emergency authorizations expired at the end of December, and to approve changes to the Business Advisory Council policy that will allow the board to be represented in regional Business Advisory Council conversations hosted by the Educational Service Center of Central Ohio. There's also a policy change that requires us to file our safety plans with the state's Director of Public Safety instead of with the Ohio Department of Education. And another policy change that recognizes registered as a credential in addition to licensed and certified for the purposes of hiring. And finally, a proposed policy change that brings us into compliance with the law requiring those teaching in preschools to be tested for tuberculosis. The last items on the consent agenda are the handbooks. For a second reading, the high school, the middle school, and the elementary school handbooks, which you have seen, and the second, the gifted handbook, which now we'll ask Dr. Colleen Boyle to introduce for a first reading. Colleen?
Thank you, Dr. Good. Thank you, members of the board, for your time. We're introducing a brand new gifted handbook to you. It is a K-12 scope. Basically, what we've done is taken the district's prior gifted operating procedures document and expanded it to include a more comprehensive document for gifted education in Bexley City Schools. Now, our intended audience is families, teachers, counselors, and administrators. By having a single document, our hope is that it creates a sense of transparency and clarity around all of the processes and procedures in the department. The purpose of the document is to document and communicate our processes and procedures, to inform readers about law, policy, along with district opportunities and programs, and then also to share resources for supporting gifted learners in the classroom and at home. Our goal essentially is to have a one-stop shop so that people can have a single place to turn when they've got a question about gifted education. The handbook also includes information about academic acceleration, which is not exclusive to gifted learners, but it is managed both by the state and our district by local gifted staff, so it seemed appropriate to include it in this handbook. We've added components of the book on our website, and we will make the full document available online for anyone to access once it has reached full board approval. Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleen is also joined by members of our community this evening to share the results of the recent equity audit, which will lay the groundwork for potential modifications to the board adopted graded course of study. Colleen?
Thank you again. I am pleased to be able to kick off our group presentation to update the board and the community on the work of our ELA secondary curriculum audit team. We have several speakers joining us tonight to represent the team, and that includes staff members Crystal Carley and Michelle Rogers, students Ruby Holt and Philip Martin, and parent Jessica Willis. I'm going to start us off with a quick overview of the process before I turn it over to them to share the outcomes. Now, beginning in February, we assembled a multi-stakeholder team together to conduct an audit of our secondary English language arts curriculum. The purpose of this work was to provide guidance as we continue to develop and implement an ELA curriculum that ensures all Bexley students consistently experience a sense of belonging. Now, the district's committed to create a safe and equitable learning climate for all students of diverse backgrounds and identities. This is the result of our current socio-political climate, calls from the community and our students, and at its core, ethical best practice. Part of that work includes creating and delivering an asset-based curriculum that is culturally relevant to all of our students that it serves, as both a mirror and a window, where students can see themselves and learn about other perspectives in the process. So evaluating and revising curriculum is a giant task because of the scope of what curriculum entails. We opted to begin with ELA for two reasons. First and foremost, it is in the middle of the district's 5-year curriculum revision and implementation cycle. Work with ELA began last year with a deep dive into the curriculum to identify strengths and needs and adjust alignment and scope and sequence as needed. Now, work stalled when the pandemic hit. However, it created an unexpected opportunity for us, as this audit was a logical next step as we pick the work back up and move it forward. Second, ELA is a natural entry point for culturally responsive curriculum and instruction. Language is how we communicate, which is at the heart of all learning. So this was a great place to start. It's important to note this is just a start. It's not the only place such an audit will occur. We felt it was important to pilot the process and start small, which is why we limited our work this year to secondary ELA curriculum. But the work is going to be ongoing across all grade levels and content areas. K-12 social studies is next to begin the curriculum review cycle next year, and other subjects will follow. Our intent is to embed this audit process in the review cycle moving forward. Now, the review process from the audit is cyclical in nature, and it's going to occur in two ways. First, the formal audit, which we're sharing with you tonight, is represented by the green circle that you'll see on the next slide. And it's a multi-stakeholder process that begins with gathering samples of the focus curriculum, utilizing teams to assess the samples, and then use a scorecard and qualitative input from others, analyzing the results and forming a summary of conclusions and action steps. That work then is revisited in the future for further review. And this cycle just focuses on a small portion of the curriculum, typically 1 or 2 units per grade band as a sample and starting point. Now, the formal district-wide process is very valuable to help create direction for our ongoing work, but the audit doesn't stop there. As I mentioned, it's just a sampling of our overall curriculum, just due to restrictions of time and resources. But our teachers review and revise all of their units of instruction on an ongoing basis. So our intent is that our teachers will use a similar reflective process when they're revising their own curriculum and lessons in their classrooms, and take the feedback from the audit as a guide when they're making their day-to-day adjustments to their lessons. They may do this through a combination of department or grade level work or independent planning. Now, on the next slide, you'll see there are 3 areas of focus within the audit. First, the teams conducted a review of the curriculum and texts used in class. This included novels, short stories, and poetry, and nonfiction editions. The ESC of Central Ohio's team randomly chose 2 units from each grade band, 6-8, 9-10, and 11-12. And although the audit teams ended up reviewing 1 unit per grade band during the formal audit process, our district ELA staff provided them with all of the text and instructional materials used during the units and made them available for the audit team to review. They were very forthcoming and freely giving of those resources. The teams then rated the units using a slightly modified version of what's called the Culturally Responsive Curriculum Scorecard that was developed by the Education Justice Research and Organizing Collaborative at NYU. We then used the same scorecard to provide insight into instructional approaches used in the ELA classrooms. And then finally, as the purpose of the audit is centered on student sense of belonging, we assess the student experience within our ELA classrooms as a critical part of that evaluation, and we'll share more information about each of these components as we move forward in the presentation. Now, the work was conducted by a core team that was comprised of Bexley teachers and support staff, parents, students, and community members. Cherie Wells of the ESC of Central Ohio was brought in to support the work from its conception to its conclusion, and she helped facilitate the core team workflow and several of the working groups throughout the process. Here you can see the full list of the core team members that were engaged from beginning to end, committing many afternoons and even some evenings to this process. Additionally, Bexley Chief Academic Officer Jill Abraham and our secondary principals provided input and support along the way. Now, the core team's role was to finalize the audit process, facilitate the stakeholder working groups that allowed for wider involvement of others, draw conclusions from the data, and make recommendations. That final team summaries will be provided later in the presentation, but first I thought I would invite some of our team members to discuss the specific working groups and the data found along the way. We're going to begin with Crystal Carley, a middle school ELA instructional chair, to explain the work of our ELA staff throughout this process. Crystal?
Hello. Next slide, please. All right. So as the work started, our secondary ELA staff was asked to share their desired outcomes from the audit. And on your screen, you see the word walls that reflect the conglomeration of our conversation held during that first meeting. From the beginning, hopefully you can see by the words that are bigger, our staff have recognized that a culturally responsive ELA curriculum needs to include diverse materials that are engaging and representative of all students. You can go on one more. Yes. So during our professional development in March, the department, go back. Yeah, there we go. In department meetings that followed, we reviewed sample units selected from our curriculum by staff from the ESC. And during that review, we utilized the CRE scorecard to examine the frequency and type of representation of various groups of people. We also had conversations about our teaching practices and reflected on diversity within our ELA curriculum as a whole. Overall, staff have been trying to be very intentional about widening the array of voices from within diverse communities represented in the texts we use. We also try to connect our selected texts to our students and current events where we can. In our review, we realized there are some groups that could be better represented as shown on this slide. We also see value in creating a document that shows the vertical alignment of text used across the 6-12 curriculum. Since it's not possible to read novels or larger texts that represent every group of people every year, a vertical alignment document will allow us to ensure there is representation over the whole middle and high school experience. And then we can focus on bringing in other supplemental voices through shorter pieces that round out our instructional units. Next, I'd like to introduce Ruby Holt and Philip Martin to share information about the voice of students in the audit process.
Hello, my name is Philip Martin, and I represented the high school portion of the curriculum audit. The input from students in grades 6 through 12 was gathered in two different ways. First, the ESC developed a short survey based on the elements of the CRE scorecard that others were using to review the selected units. 710 students completed the survey, including 400 from the middle school and 310 from the high school, representing 55.3% of students in middle and high school.
10 students.
The data showed that between 62 and 86% of students answered favorable to items regarding their ability to safely ask questions and share differing opinions and opportunities to think critically and engage in their ELA classrooms. Although these numbers were slightly lower for students of color, all student groups were very favorable in their opinions about the classroom environment. The data also revealed that half or more students feel they relate to the text used in class only sometimes or rarely. On the other hand, half or more students reported the texts they read highlight non-dominant populations sometimes or frequently, but this number was somewhat lower for students of color. Opinions about whether readings in class inspired students to think about social justice or reissues of equity were more varied without one dominant opinion. Thank you. Now I'll turn it over to Ruby Holt.
Hello, sorry about that earlier. My computer has been glitching. Following the survey, focus groups were formed at the middle and high school to gather additional information that couldn't be captured on the survey. Students of diverse backgrounds and representatives of BARP were invited to a pizza lunch, and we led conversations with them about their perceptions of representation and belonging in the ELA classroom. Groups included 11 middle school students and 14 high school students across all grades. We asked our classmates questions to understand if they relate to the text we read in our ELA classes, if they feel the text we read highlight non-dominant populations in a positive way, and if they feel a sense of belonging in class. For each of the questions, some individual students had strong opinions one way or another. The selected quotes on this slide were selected as examples of the general conversation and most common opinion in the groups. Students in the focus groups generally said they sometimes relate to the books in class. Comments included notes about the text being older, having limited people of color or limiting the characters of color to specific time periods or roles, such as slavery or civil rights eras. Our classmates recognized that there are texts featuring African Americans, but there was concern that there were few examples of other racial or ethnic groups, and that stories about people of color were primarily focused on oppression or struggle without representing other life experiences or aspects of identity, or they were told from white perspectives. Despite concerns about the books we read in class, students in the focus groups typically feel a sense of belonging in the class. There was a mix of opinions, both wanting to talk about race more often than during Black History Month, while also feeling uncomfortable talking about race, particularly if the student is the only person of color in the room. As you can see, the last quote on the slide referenced events of last summer. Just to give everyone listening some background, on May 25th, 2020, a Black man named George Floyd was pinned to the ground by a white police officer named Derek Chauvin in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This, combined with other events that had their roots in race and issues surrounding race, such as the previous shooting of a Black woman named Breonna Taylor, sparked protests in the country and around the world over the summer and started a national conversation about race and racism. Even though Derek Chauvin was found guilty on all 3 of the charges that he faced, the work to stop racism is far from finished. Part of the reason the district began conducting curriculum audit was in response to those events. Next, I'd like to introduce Jessica Willis, a Bexley parent and educator in a neighboring district, to share information about the role of parents and community members in the process.
Thank you, Ruby. My name is Jessica Willis, and like she said, I represented the parent group. In order to ensure diverse perspectives were brought into the audit, community engagement and communication was a critical component. All of the documents shared, data reviewed, and notes from the conversations held during these meetings were made publicly available on the district's website for anyone to review. A form was also provided for individuals to provide commentary or feedback on the process and the information provided. Our goal is to maintain transparency during the process, and that information will remain available online for anyone to review. One of the key working groups that participated in the audit was comprised of Bexley parents and community members. A call was put out in all school building newsletters in February, inviting individuals to participate in the working groups. It was also shared on social media platforms, including the Bexley Minority Parent Alliance Facebook page. Initial interest was around 15 people, with 9 parents and community members working on the project all the way through. These team members included parents of Bexley students across all grade bands. It also included several area consultants with expertise in diverse youth literature and culturally responsive teaching, including representatives from Bexley Public Library and neighboring university affiliates. The role of the working group was to review a sample of the ELA curriculum. This included 1 middle school unit, 1 9th and 10th grade unit, and 1 unit from the 11th and 12th grade bands. The participants used the CRE scorecards to examine representation of diverse characters and authors in text and how diverse groups are portrayed. It also took a look at social justice themes in text, including the novels and any short stories, poems, nonfiction pieces, and in teacher materials. After reviewing the materials independently, the team came together to discuss what we experienced. The individual scores rating using the scorecard varied widely. However, the conversations within the group showed a lot of common perspectives. Similarly to the student and staff discoveries, our work group felt that there were intentional efforts to bring diversity and variety into the classroom, but we also felt that there were groups that could be better represented, as listed here. We would like to see more of a range of representation of individual groups. We look forward to seeing how the curriculum continues to evolve to include a more varied perspective and examples of the complexity of the human experience. Finally, we greatly appreciate the willingness of the ELA staff to allow us behind the curtains, and we hope that they invite us in the future as resources while they have these conversations with their students. This was truly a collaborative effort. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Michelle Rogers, the Bexley High School ELA Department Chair, to share the core team's recommendation and staff action plans. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Kyle, you can stay on the slide for a moment. After each work group compiled their reviews and shared findings, the core team reconvened to look at everything in order to understand the big picture view of diversity and equity in our ELA curriculum. The team concluded that our students feel valued and heard while in our ELA classrooms, although they recognize both teachers and students are still developing the skills and comfort level when it comes to discussing issues of race within the classroom. The team also determined there is a need for more diverse voices within the text used in our ELA classrooms to represent a broader array of experiences among different groups of people. Based on those conclusions, the team put forth the following recommendations. First, the team recommends the district utilize newer and more diverse materials, continuing the practice of offering student choice in text and format where appropriate. In particular, the team encourages educators to include more voices from the Asian American, Latino, Middle Eastern, and LGBTQ communities, and that represent varied family structures, economic status, and ability. To do that, the team recognizes the district needs to set aside the appropriate financial and support resources for teachers along the way. And finally, the core team recommends surveying students again in the future to monitor change and continue to provide them with voices in the process. Next slide. So in the recent weeks, the ELA departments in both buildings have been developing action plans for our next steps on this work based on the core team recommendations and our own findings. Each grade level or teacher has selected 1 or 2 units to revise for next school year. And each year we will review another 1 or 2 units until we work our way through the curriculum. At that point, it will be time to start back with the first units again. As we revise units and continue with the rest of the curriculum review cycle for ELA, we will also develop a vertical chart to identify which key texts are used across multiple middle and high school grade levels. This will allow us to ensure that there is diverse representation across texts over time and that texts are aligned to grade specific standards and not duplicated from year to year. Then we will pursue new texts to provide broader representation, particularly for specific groups identified during the audit. Next year, we will utilize the textbook adoption process to review and select anthologies for courses where they are needed. And finally, we are looking forward to opportunities to access professional development, particularly learning from other classroom teachers who focus on diversity and equity in secondary ELA classrooms. Our consultants from the university and the library communities have provided us with lists of resources from which we can draw as we move forward with this work, and district leaders have been intentional in their budget process to set aside funds to help cover the expenses of any new texts or professional development required. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Boyle, and I will just say on behalf of the core team that it has been great to work with Dr. Boyle. She's been an incredible listener. She's been engaged and she's hands-on. And this was, for all of us, I think, our first deep dive with her on something, and it was a great process. So we thank you for that, Dr. Boyle.
Thanks, Michelle. I appreciate that. So as we close, I want to share appreciation for the support of the board and the administrative team, and then most importantly, the engagement of all who are part of this process along the way. All of the individuals who served on the work groups and the core team, including our teaching staff, amazing student leaders, parents and community members, and the ESC, spent an incredible amount of time and energy on this work, staying late, reading novels, giving up lunches or planning time, researching resources, analyzing data. The list goes on. And it was a new venture for all of us. And so, I appreciate everyone being willing to give it a try and to give feedback along the way so we can have a really refined process for cycles moving forward. We're excited to take the next steps in developing and implementing an ELA curriculum that ensures all Bexley students consistently experience a sense of belonging. It's going to be an ongoing collaboration across levels and will be work that takes time and commitment. Our goal is that our ELA staff will continue to informally do this type of analysis, and I'm seeing them do that already in the weeks since this audit has concluded. And we look forward to applying the formal process to work in other content areas in the future. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. That was fantastic. I so appreciate that very thorough and thoughtful report. Does anybody have any questions?
I do.
Mm-hmm.
First, Dr. Boyle, I just have to say, I am beyond over the moon with this process that you all shared with us and walked us through. And I just hats off to you and the core team and the work groups. Dr. Rogers, I mean, just to see this sort of played out in a very easy to follow presentation that we can share with our community on this work that we have committed to. I'm really, really excited about it. So I just have just a couple of comments, really. I was so excited to see Ruby and Philip. Thank you so much. I don't know what we have to do to continue to include students in presentations, but I was trying not to light up. So thank you. Really excited about that. The data points that you guys provided to us sort of affirmed what I think that we on the board have seen in our own data. Just that experience for students is sometimes different. And I appreciate you for acknowledging that and calling that out and really speaking to how you would bring that into the classrooms in a practical way. Thank you for sharing the list of the core team members. I think sometimes when work gets away from the level of the board, it's hard to know who's stepping in and giving our district feedback. And it was really wonderful to see names I was familiar with and names that I wasn't. So thank you. And then the only question that I have is, Dr. Boyle, you have mentioned that this work will act as feedback and a guide. And maybe my question is not so much for you, but for the board is, should we be thinking about taking it from a guide standpoint, but an expectation of how we want this to be applied district-wide? So this may be a longer term question and just putting it out there. And I like to let things stew for a little bit before I chew on it. So giving you all the opportunity to do the same. So thank you. Great job, everyone. I really, really appreciated it.
I just want to add my appreciation. This work is so important. It's being done in such an effective way, patiently, with thoroughness, inclusion of the important voices. And I think, to Alicia's point, the ability to use this first incredibly well done process as a guide for doing this again and again and continuing the work, not just once, but giving us a template for continuing the work. It won't stop. And so I'm so grateful to the undertaking of this important work and the huge effort from all the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, I just want to say, somebody in your report said that this is a work on the complexity of human experience, and I love that. That really encapsulates what you all have done and are working to do, as we all are. And I just am deeply appreciative of the work. So thank you all very much for sharing your time with us. I think that, and that Dr. Good, is that the end of your comments for tonight?
Just about. I want to thank Dr. Boyle and the team for that presentation. I have one final comment to make. In just 19 days, Memorial Day weekend in the stadium, we are hosting the graduation ceremony for 180 Bexley High School seniors. And I will say I truly could not be any prouder of a class that has endured arguably one of the most uncertain senior years since the late 1960s and early 1970s. And I know because I was a student then. If you'd like to show your support for these graduates, these survivors, these thrivers, watch for details about the reverse parade, which will take place on Saturday, May 29th at 10 a.m. This is truly a tribute to a community's coming together and supporting our graduating class through a pandemic. And I thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I just want to go back for 1 second. Sorry. Is Dr. Boyle, are you still with us? You're just like, no, I want to go home.
I'm still here.
Okay. I did just want to thank you. I have had children in the schools for 20 years now, maybe. And when I first started with a child in kindergarten, the gifted program was so confusing to me. And I spent many hours sifting through documents and trying to understand things. And you literally brought tears to my eyes when I saw what you had done with this handbook. Thank you so much. As a parent of a child gifted and twice exceptional child, it is such good work, and I'm so grateful that we have it in our district now, and I cannot thank you enough for your work and your team's work on that. So I just wanted to make sure and make note of it.
Thank you.
All right, so that moves us on from the superintendent's comments and all of that good work to some of our action items. So if I could have a motion, please, to approve items
Marley.
Uh-huh.
Before you do that, I just had 2 or 3 very quick things that I wanted to highlight from everything that was in the superintendent's report.
Sure.
And one of them was on the gifted handbook that you just commented on. I had the same reaction to it. And in particular, I just wanted to share gratitude for the second half of that report of the gifted handbook, which contains so many resources, an appendix, a glossary, so much additional information for our community. And I'm very, very grateful that all of that is there as a huge resource. Very thankful for that. I wanted to also, on another topic, turn to the policies that we're adopting or looking at tonight. And I appreciate the new policy BCFA, which is the one that provides us flexibility to go with the ESC for services, for the work that Dr. Good described. We don't have to, but I think it's a great option for us. So I'm very grateful for that. And with respect to the handbooks, I did have a bunch of questions as usual, and I got all the answers I needed. And I wanted to point out that I had a question, so I thought others might have the question about the transition to middle school. The revisions to the handbook take away some of what's been there before in terms of transitioning from elementary to middle school. And so I asked about that, and I just wanted to point out that I was reassured that the transitional support is still being given. It's being given in a slightly different way by having that work done in the elementary schools at the end of, as those students prepare to transition instead of in the middle school. But the changes don't reflect that support will no longer be there. It's just being done in a different way. And I was grateful for those responses that I received from a bunch of different people, but that one came from Jason Caudill and through Dr. Good. And so I really appreciated that. And I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. And that's what I got. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, so now I need a motion to approve items 6E, B like boy, through K.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. This is personal matters, so can I have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Ms. Powers,
Yes.
Ms. Minio,
Yes.
Mr. Barno,
I am a yes on everything except I have to recuse myself for 6E because my daughter is on there as a coach. So I will recuse or abstain, I guess, not recuse, abstain from voting on
3E, right?
Approval of.
Yeah. 6E.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's 6.
For approval of supplemental and stipend request, yes. My daughter, Kaylee Heater, is on there. So.
Okay.
Otherwise, yes for everything else.
Thank you. Ms. Mitchell
Yes.
and Ms. Snowden.
I am a yes for 6B and then D through K, but a no for C.
No for 6C. Everything else a yes, is that right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so moving on in our agenda for our treasurer's report, Mr. Smith, can you put that together?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to try to see if that slides in. Did the forecast come up?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Good work.
You need one of those Sports Center sounds. Bum, 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 bum.
Nice graphic. That's very clever. Oh, wait, it went away.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to get it on there first.
Okay.
So I'm going to talk about a few agenda items and then finish with the forecast. So monthly report, I'll just pretty much incorporate the 5-year forecast into the monthly stuff, or the monthly stuff into the forecast. 7D, auxiliary services. So this is state money that we have on our books for not our private schools like St. Charles. And because they are purchasing a significant amount of technology, it's over that $25,000 threshold. So that's an improvement or approval on our side, but again, it's state money. It's no cost to our district or taxpayers. There's a memorandum of agreement with OPSI regarding bus drivers that we've been working on for several months. So we're happy to have that for your approval and cooperation with our OPSI union. 6G is a fiscal specialist job description. As you know, and I mentioned last month, Joan Roberts is retiring. We're modifying that job title and description to more appropriately fit the duties of that job. We've finished receiving applications. I'm excited to see the qualifications and applications that have come in. We'll start interviewing that within the next probably week or two, and should have a based on their experience. I'm feeling very confident that we'll have a high quality candidate for to replace Joan. Now we'll get into the fun part of the 5-year forecast. I took a quick second to find a nice, quick, fun graphic about trying to forecast in a year of COVID. As you know, like a year ago when we were here, we had approved 2 forecasts in May, one on May 5th and one on May 18th, because the state had budget cuts right in the middle, right as soon as we did our first forecast. And from that point, from as soon as we passed the second forecast, we were looking at $635,000 of cuts in that year and this year. And the states changed that twice on us to the good. So that's an example of how fast things can change on us. And as we've all experienced as a community, we've changed several ways of learning modes, and that affects finances in several ways too. But sorry, I'm just trying to get this to go here. There we go. So again, as I've said many times, there's many things about a forecast that moves and changes. We're in a fortunate district that we have the resources to be able to do that to the best needs, or to respond to the needs of our students. So what happens for the May forecast typically in a school district? You make changes that you know on revenue for the year. Most of our revenue is in this year. I'll talk about those numbers. Any significant changes, changes in expenditures. We don't really have anything significant in expenditures I'm going to talk about tonight. We did make a small change for insurance benefits. You've heard me talk about in December, Medical Mutual gave us a little bit of a premium break on our insurance, and so I made that small adjustment. This time of year, we're talking about staffing assumptions and changes with retirements. That changes a little bit of the forecasts for next year. We've added in the forecast additional grades for Cassingham and Maryland in the 3rd grade level, as well as intervention specialists. And also this time of year, we also finalize and review our FY22 budgeting, and that's been mostly completed and incorporated into this budget for next year. So the significant revenue changes that we've made for this fiscal year in 21 is, I mentioned that state funding that was revised or changed since our November forecast to the good of $226,000. That was done by executive order in Governor DeWine. Income taxes were known for this fiscal year and finalized at the end of April. I'll talk about that through several slides. And then property taxes are known, which also are faring a little bit better than what we had projected. So this is a variance on the right of variances in revenue on the forecast. So I've just taken the first few lines of revenue, and you can see property taxes are doing better of $522,000. That could just be a little bit of a timing issue. Again, property taxes are collected on a calendar year basis. So, but it does, based on preliminary review, it does look to be better and not so much a timing issue. The income taxes, we'll talk about that again in a few more slides, but done very well this year. The $8.4 million is an actual number, and that is the highest we've ever seen in Bexley in the nearly 20 years of collection. So that's great news, but I'll put an asterisk on that, as I don't think that that's a number that we can rely on every year. And then 1.035, the unrestricted state grants and aid, that's our state foundation. So 291,000. There's been a few small adjustments from that 226 on the previous slide, but that's in response to the change in the governor's executive order. There's another line that was significant in revenue, and I think when I presented in November, that same day we got word that the state was going to issue rebates on workers' compensation. For us, that was about $300,000. That's not reflected in these lines that I've highlighted here, but just another example of changes that happen literally the day that I present a forecast to you. So let's talk about income tax, where I'll spend the majority of this evening on, is that $8.4 million that we received this year, and why you see reductions the following year of several $100,000. Again, this is our most volatile line of the forecast, at least on the revenue side. And we want to be conservative here because we've seen significant drops in this over the years, or not over the years, in a couple instances. And if you look at the right-hand side of this graph here, or you look at the key at the bottom, the numbers, I'll just read off the numbers in the April. So this is cumulative. In 2017, we had $8.1 million. The following year, we had 6.8. Then that remained stable for FY19. FY20, we saw a pretty big increase, almost to 8 million, and then we're seeing 8.4. So we've hit an $8 million amount before, but then saw a significant decrease. And at the time, we get very little information, as you've heard me say over and over, on our income tax. The State Department protects that information, rightfully so, of our taxpayers, but sometimes you can get a little information from them. And I got a little bit of what was happening this year of 8.4 because that seemed high. So graphically, this is another way of looking at it. Our income tax comes in several buckets. That top bar, or the green bar, is employer payments. So individuals who have their wages withheld through their paychecks. That is normally the most stable bucket here. You can see some decent growth or stability, 3.2 for the first couple of years, then 3.4, then 3.6. The 3-year average of 3.4, but then you see it shoots up to 3.9 million in this fiscal year. The next two beneath that, the red and the blue, does have some variance, and those are usually individuals who do not have, or are individuals who do not have their employers withholding. These can be self-employed individuals. They could be high wage earners. So you see some fluctuations there. And so you see in the red, if you look at, hopefully you can see my cursor, FY20 in the red, we had 2 million. This year we saw a reduction down to 1.8, almost 1.9 million. But in the blue, which is the individual filers, 2.7 million, increased up to 3 million. So what I really want to highlight now is that employer withholding amount. So this is I guess an internal spreadsheet that I keep, and I've pulled off the employer payments. So if you look at the chart, the dark blue is the April payments over the last 4 years. So in April 2018, you can see an April payment of 925,000. Again for April 2019, April 2020, 977,000, which was an increase of 5.5%, which is not too far off, or not. I mean, it's within reason to see a 5.5% increase in some of these years. But in April 2021, I saw a 28% increase just in this particular bucket, which really stood out to me of what was going on, because like I've said many times, the employer portion is pretty steady. The increases are reasonable, but to see a 20% increase was like, what's going on? And the State Department of Taxation, you can see I kind of quoted their email responses to some of my questions, that one employer had a significant increase in reporting in December that was paid for January this year. So I responded to them. I said, how about the subsequent months that they've collected? And the response was, as you can see, January to April 2021, this employer remitted similar amounts compared to January to April of 2020. So that goes back to my, or the assumption that I've made, that I'm not sure that our income tax will be as strong as it was this year, because for whatever reason, there was a significant payment from an employer, which I don't know the employer's name, to residents that live within Bexley.
Well, it would have to be one of the larger employers in the city, like a Capital or the city of Bexley, correct?
So not necessarily employers within the city of Bexley, but employers probably within our region that have a significant amount of employees that live in Bexley, or significant earners.
Mm-hmm.
So significant, I would say significant employers. With a payroll that's sophisticated enough to submit payroll deductions for taxes, because not every employer has the payroll sophistication to submit their taxes to the state.
It's a huge jump. Like, that's more than an anomaly. It's like a throw out.
Yeah, so I mean that's part of my job, I believe, to monitor this and prepare for it, and not just say, oh, we got $8.4 million, we're going to get 8.4 next year. I believe that's what you want me to prepare you for these dips or maybe anomalies. 2017, we didn't know. So when I started in 2017, that $8.1 million, I was fresh here, and it looked like a nice increase, but when we dove into why we were getting, it was there were reasons for it that we could. Now I know to ask a little bit more from the state, and they've been good partners to give me as much information as they can. But all I can tell you is it's an employer.
I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry.
No, interrupt as much as you guys would like. So one thing that I think is always important, many districts look at this, and I believe you've asked me this question before, is how much money do we have at the end of the day? How can we compare ourselves to other districts with how much cash on hand do we have on June 30th? Another way of saying it is, if we were not to receive revenue after June 30th, how many days can we operate on our reserves? As you know, it was very important for us this year to have cash because of swings in revenue. The county delayed their property tax revenue by a month, or maybe 6 or 8 weeks. I'm starting to forget how long it was, but we didn't get our full collection until September. That's significant. I mean, we have to have significant amounts of cash to be able to swing that, to be able to make payroll and pay the utilities, especially over the summer. At the same time, the federal government delayed income tax collections last year. Delayed it to July. So we saw, if you'll recall, maybe if I go back a couple slides, you'll see that this green line, you can see normally in a year, we collect anywhere from nearly 3 million to 3.5 million. But this past July, we collected 1.5 because of the federal filing delay of income taxes. So that's why it's important for a district, especially with an income tax, to have a little bit of cash, a little bit more cash on hand than a district that solely relies on property tax normally. But again, last year, because of the delay of property taxes, it was, we're fortunate that we have the cash balance to be able to make payroll and to keep operations running smoothly. So if you ask me what would be the target for a district like ours, I would say at least 90 days in the years 4 or 5 of a forecast, and you can see we're above that. This is a chart that we usually talk about a lot, and especially levy time, when we're talking about that stair step of when a levy happens, we get revenue above our expenditures, and then expenditures are almost like a ramp up. So you can see that happening here with the top 2 lines, the blue and the red, the blue being revenue, where we've finally seen that first year of collections from our levy of 2019. And if in actual 20, it was just a partial collection from that levy. Again, this year is a full year's collection, in addition to good, strong income tax revenue. So when we were talking about a levy in 2019, that green line, the ending cash balance, we were seeing a much steeper cliff. We've done well with the finances of revenue and expenditures, so that green line is not so much of a cliff for us. At least that's how it looks right now. So that's all in all. I would say we're looking stronger than where we were in November financially. Part of that is due to the revenue coming in. Expenditures are under forecast, which is always good to see. Nothing substantially off there. And I will leave it up to questions. We can obviously pull up the larger document of the forecast if you want to point at something in there, but I'll leave it to questions from here.
Mr. Smith, could you pull up that last slide real quick? I just want to see that. So I know we had kind of talked about when we talked about the whole when might we need to go back out to the public for a levy, and we sort of projected 23 or 24. If we pushed all the way to 25, it's a much bigger gap and a bigger ask based on this graph. It just, if all things kind of stay relatively the same, correct?
Yeah, so you're talking about the gap between the red and the blue. Yes, that's true. The further the levy is pushed, the larger potential ask could be. But that gap has gotten smaller since November. If you look at the year 25, that gap between the red and blues gotten smaller. So I will zoom in here for us. So another line that I didn't put on the in this slideshow is this line right here, is line 6.01, the excess of revenues or surplus or deficit. So this 3.5 was right before the levy. You can see we're running a deficit that was significant. And we're not seeing anything like that for several more years as of right now. So seeing a significant surplus this year, again, that's due to state funding, income tax, property tax. COVID relief dollars are not part of this forecast, but they have helped us not incur one-time expenditures that we've seen through COVID.
Right.
Which has helped us. I mean, there are some things that we were able to spend with COVID dollars.
Which is great, because that's certainly what it's intended for. Yeah. Okay, any other questions of Mr. Smith?
It's Victoria. I just want to say that I already had the benefit of being able to have gone through all of this with Mr. Smith before this evening. I am so grateful to you for keeping such a detailed eye on what's going on with our revenues, bringing the numbers to us and making it super clear of what you're seeing, what we can expect going forward, and helping us to, guide our thought process on the budget. It's super, super helpful, and I'm really very grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I'll convene the finance committee here in the next couple of weeks. They haven't seen an email from me, but I do plan to get them together, and we'll talk about this forecast, talk about get their feelings on levies and where we are financially, and talk about the future, hopefully, of getting out of a COVID environment and going from there. But we met in the fall. I think it's time for them to get back together and kind of review how we've fared over the last year.
Great. Thank you.
That's all I had this evening.
Thank you very much. All right. Can I have a motion to approve items 4B through G?
So moved.
Thank
Second.
you. Thank you. Any questions, further questions? All right. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Thank you. That motion carries. All right, so we're moving on to the public participation portion of our meeting tonight. Mr. Triller, Mr. Smith, do you know if we have anybody signed up for public participation?
We have 2 people that have signed up for public comment this evening.
Great, thank you. Then I will address that accordingly. Thank you. So although under state law, the Board of Education is not required to offer public comment time during our regular board meetings, we welcome the opportunity to hear from our community members. As such, we encourage your participation within certain parameters. Prior to the start of the meeting, we ask that you sign in, which you've essentially done online. And when you speak, if you could please state your name and address for our records. If you can also limit your comments to 5 minutes per our board policy. Finally, we note that public comment is just that. It's the public's opportunity to be heard. It is not a question and answer session with the board. We look forward to hearing your comments, and per our board policy, we will not respond to public comment in a meeting or as individual board members, but you can be assured that we're actively listening and taking notes for future reference and review. So given that, Mr. Trill, if you could admit our public participation members.
All right, the first participant will be Shelly Bloom, and she, I have given her the ability to speak in this meeting, so she's up.
Thank you.
Hi, members of the board. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Shelly Bloom, and I live at 474 South Parkview Avenue. I'm a parent to a young child, and though we don't currently use the schools, we've been super excited for our child to be part of the learning community when he is ready for kindergarten. And despite my love for Bexley, it gives me a lot of pause to be excited for my son to partake in the schooling, knowing that the leadership currently allows some space for students to be and feel unsafe. According to a school report by the nonprofit Learning for Justice, the most amounts of bullying, harassment, and abuse occur outside the classroom when things aren't supervised. Despite this, harassment of any kind impacts our learners. So what happens outside of the classroom most certainly and without a doubt impacts the learning that happens inside of the classroom. We know that Bexley is kind of like a bubble and one of whiteness and affluence. That can very easily slide into the perfect situation for white supremacy and chauvinistic patriarchal values to breed. But I believe in the anti-racist culture that the school is working on. And I know that the schools can't control what happens outside of their walls, but leadership can absolutely control their responses. When I heard about what happened to the nearly 60 senior girls and the lack of response from the schools, I was horrified. The board policy states in section JFCFR which is the bullying and hazing section, that prohibited behaviors include but are not limited to repetitive and hostile behavior with the intent to harm others through the use of information and communication technologies, such as distributing or posting photos or videos online without consent or knowledge, and using websites, social networking sites, blogs, personal journals, email, instant messages, to circulate gossip and rumors to other students. So what happened with that ranking list was a clear violation of the board policy. And I'm really glad that the girls eventually got justice for the perpetrators. But I'm very concerned that it took as long as it did. And I'm even more concerned about the follow-up speaker who came to the buildings. I cannot imagine how those 6 individuals felt knowing it took a week for action to be taken. And then to have to listen to a speaker who is not a certified mental health counselor, probably and likely rehash some trauma. That safety expert is a white woman who goes by Big Mama, which is a character from a Tyler Perry movie released back in 2000. And it kind of gives me, makes me question how the district didn't have pause about whether that individual is culturally sensitive enough to speak to children. So in all, the situation was mismanaged by multiple people and at multiple points. Our students deserve better. And I realize that this is a school year of several hardships, but it's never going to be a convenient time to dismantle the systemic issues that persist in our schools. We need leadership that trusts the victims first, not ones that make excuses and a boys will be boys type of mindset. We need leadership that's fair and puts concerns about the long-term impacts that this has had on our female students as a priority. And most importantly, we need leadership that is action-oriented and thinking about what we can do in the buildings across all grade levels to dismantle this type of culture. Getting an equitable and inclusive curriculum is paramount to beginning to make changes. And we know that early intervention is the best prevention. This goes beyond just having diverse text. It's about the conversations that happen from these texts and the supports that are put in place. I know that diversity, equity, and inclusion are issues that are deeply important to Dr. Jason Fine. He is beloved in Upper Arlington for his commitment to student inclusion. That said, our community has a lot of work to do. We need to dismantle the systems that give grace to toxic masculinity and oppress women and other marginalized individuals. Our new leadership should be thinking about how we can start conversations about these topics in elementary school and provide support to those educators who are already doing the work. We need to stop with the buzzwords and take action. Bexley is a community that was founded on redlining and intentionally maintaining toxic, undeserved power. Our leadership needs to make significant changes to be a more inclusive place. These are the kinds of issues and concerns we should make a priority as we turn a new chapter in our learning communities. Our students deserve to be safe, feel valued, and be heard. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Trill, we have another community member.
Yes, that is Saul Darrow. I am searching for him. Mr. Darrow, if you're in the meeting still, could you please press the raise hand feature so I can. I don't see him in the attendees currently.
Okay, thank you. Let me see if I see him even in our attendees. I was looking earlier at the attendees, but
I don't see him there.
He was in earlier. He left the meeting some time ago.
okay. Okay. Well, I guess moving on then, that will end our time for public participation. And move us on to any other matters that may properly come before the board, of which I do not believe there are any. We have also been able to finish all of our work in executive session in our first executive session this evening. So we will not need to hold this second executive session that was put in as placeholder for under item 10. So that takes me to our adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Marley, before we adjourn, can I just make one comment that I had intended to make earlier tonight about our retirees? I know you attended and I also attended the retirement celebration today. I thought it was really a very special moment of reflection on wonderful teachers who've had many years of service and Harley Williams did a really lovely job speaking to the attributes of those of our teachers who have retired this year. Some really wonderful people that we are truly going to miss and that we have all as a district learned so much from. And also there were teachers who have, Dr. Good mentioned, who are moving out of our district or leaving. And there are just fantastic teachers that we will not have going forward, who have been an important part of the fabric of this district and who taught my children and many other people's children as well. And so I just want to say thank you. It's great to have that recognition of those folks as they retire and also those who are leaving. So I just wanted to say thank you to them, and on behalf of the board, Godspeed to them.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so a motion for adjournment, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Thank you. That motion carries. Good night, all. Thank you for your work.
Good night.